Okay, we're on.
All right. Well, good morning, and thanks to everyone for joining us here today at the Committee of the Whole work session, Supporting Community Through Quality Public Service. It's 10:30 on Tuesday, March 21st, and we're going to begin. If you look on our agenda, we have our minutes, and then we have 3 presentations today. The first being that of the Cook County Historical Society, and they're going to provide us with an annual update and also talk a little bit about archival storage. So welcome to the Historical Society representatives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure how the slideshow part is going to work here.
Me neither.
You all have handouts, but do we have to go through the PowerPoint as well?
I'm not sure where he went.
The only thing I heard from last meeting is we have to click presentation mode, but I think that's not the first step. He said, "What are you doing? Get away from that."
It's the blind leading the blind.
Did you each introduce yourselves on camera? Because Mario, you're not on camera, but
Where do I go to be on
I
camera?
don't.
Well, you're
Snug
right
it
on the
out.
edge.
Nice how you phrase.
Yeah, there you go. So why don't the 3 of you introduce yourselves?
I'm Maria Erickson. I'm the president of the Cook County Historical Society.
I'm Katie Clark. I'm the Director of Operations.
Myron Bersheim, Vice President of the Cook County Historical Society.
All right, well, thank you. So today, this is an opportunity for us. We annually hear from the Cook County Historical Society to provide us with an update on their activities. And we'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Just going to kind of jump into basically some highlights here from the 2022 going into 2023 here. Biggest thing we've been working on is we have a Historical Societies Alliance study that we're part of. Schroeder Area Historical Society applied for a grant through the Minnesota Historical Society Heritage Partnership Grant, and we're just investigating the different ways that the historical societies and heritage organizations can work together. We've put in over 400 hours collectively in building a foundation upon which this kind of collaborative relationship will help us to work together and help us to offer more to the public. Just going down the list here, we're still offering free access to all of our historical sites, and that's estimated now at about 27,000 patrons on a yearly basis. All of our events are still free. Both locals and tourists are always invited to participate. We just had the World Press Institute in, journalists from all over the world. We have demonstrations. We have a monthly culture crawl. We're doing tours, exhibitions, art openings. We still offer our newsletters. We're doing trivia nights to get ourselves out there and introducing some history to a different crowd. Community collections is something new where we're inviting the community to come in and show some collections that they have. We've gone through many updates and repairs to our historical sites, painting and landscaping at both JHP and the museum, put siding on bollies to keep the snow out, furnace updates, signage, and then also a lot of updates to our Passport to the Past program, which is a countywide program. We also have many efforts in on the possibility of state money, which would allow us to repair and restore many, if not all, of our properties, kind of asking for what we want, see if we can get what we need to get those fixed up. We're very grateful for the funding received from the county and the Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation and Visit Cook County. Funds have gone mainly towards programming and events. Some of the community collaborations that we're a part of, obviously the Historical Societies and Heritage Centers, going through that alliance study. We're already working on some joint programming, an event for the fall. The fish.
There you go.
So not jump ahead, sorry about that.
That's fine. As we can, we attend meetings or organizations where we also play a role in other community initiatives. We're part of the Creative Economy Collaborative as well as the North Shore Scenic Drive Council. We also took part in that Old Shore Road Committee and showed some support there. We've helped out different organizations, Minnesota Children's Press. We actually dedicate a lot of time to research, either to support our own sharing goals and then also to aid researchers, authors, students, families. The local artists and artisans, we invite them to exhibits. We give them another chance to sell their work and provide demonstrations and talks. And then also, we have an exhibit here at the courthouse, so when we have a chance, we like to share exhibits around the county. We are also working on, it's about 2017, I believe JHP was kind of brought in more under the umbrella of the Historical Society. So we have a new steering committee that's looking at the two separate missions that we still have and considering consolidating them along with kind of updating our strategic planning in that area. So the missions are somewhat similar, but we're going to see what we can do to kind of bring JHP more under kind of the heritage part of the Historical Society, just kind of integrate it and increase the heritage education and exhibitions at the art gallery. As I said, we're also looking at updating our strategic plan. We're looking at expanding our educational tours. We're pushing again. COVID kind of upended a lot of things, and we're trying to get more curriculum back into the schools or having the groups come and visit our different sites, including Bollies now, as well as that's an option. We've been working on securing funding for needed restoration and repairs, and again, the further collaboration with the area organizations. We're growing our fall Heritage Gathering event, and hopefully that can become a collaborative event as well. And then also, we're looking ahead to plan that celebration 2024 of 100 years for the organization. Next, we have our statement of activity. We had put in a preliminary budget, I suppose, early in the spring of around 2022. So what I've included here in the report is a current statement of activity for the last fiscal year. And then the next page, I do have to just explain that on the PowerPoint, there's an error in condensing our budgeting tool down into a graphic that could fit in the PowerPoint. The actuals do not match the statement of activity in that first slide. But the revised budget is what I was shooting for here because it's significantly different than what we had sent into the county back in the spring. So it just shows an updated version now that we have reestablished our in-house bookkeeping. We have that back in-house. Myron, you had a point?
Yeah, just wanted to comment to point out one thing, and Katie alluded to it, but I would like to elaborate on that a little bit more, is that if you look at, on the second page, service fees was previously $33,992, and our proposed budget is, revised budget is for $22,635. So about $11,000 or a little bit less. And one of the things the reason for that is that we had a board member, a new board member come on board with some accounting background. Bobby Collins is her name. And Katie and Bobby worked a long time. They put a lot of hours in. And they took over the services that we're paying for to the tune of $11,000 to $13,000 a year. Now, there's still some payroll expenses there that have to still be paid, which are very small compared to before. So just by cutting that down is about $11,000 in our budget. And part of that is the process the board has been considering how we can do more with less, because we have less, and the idea is to have board members that can help more. and pay less for service fees. So, because that's been our major expense. Those things are necessary at times, and it was the only thing we could do, but we're really trying to build a board, and I would say that we have a definite improvement in the board. Nothing against the others. We just don't really. I want to give Maria credit for that. She recruited some really great people to be on our board. So I've been affiliated with the Historical Society as a commissioner for some years now, as well as a member of the board. So really want to commend Katie for taking that on, because now that's part of her job. And really want to give credit to Maria for recruiting these people that can do these wonderful things, because we have some real talented board members. That's all.
County support there. So we just want to say thank you again to the county for all of your support. We know that the state legislature authorizes each county to help fund their county's historical society, and we're very grateful to you and our community for valuing that history. We've had a long-standing relationship, and that's made it possible for us to continue with our mission. We are moving on to 100 years. We're very excited about that. We do have some challenges, especially since the pandemic just reduced staff, and the volunteer pool that we had before, it's just not the same as it was. So we're continuing to kind of work with the challenges there, and we're working with the new committees steering, in particular, in building capacity, just to better serve the community, kind of increase the outreach to the public, as well as get our collections better organized and cared for. Some of the challenges that we have continued follow-up from the flooding that we had in 2017 and 2018. There was damage, and we had to deaccession a lot of items. We have continued flooding and plumbing leaks in the museum basement. The sump pump system that was put in after the two flooding episodes back in 2017 and 18, that system is currently broken and not able to handle it when we have storms and floods. When we have a lot of rain or flooding, we need to rely on staff to watch the basement and carry pails of water out, and it's a worry. We have the museum open at this time, and we have the exhibits back up and open, but to do that, we had to put our collections back down in that space in the basement, although we really took into consideration the levels of water that we've had in there before, so we put thought into how they're arranged down there. Not only the items in the basement, we would like a safer space for the collections, but we also have artifacts kind of everywhere else. We have them, they're in people's garages, they're up in Hovland, they're in storage containers. JHP, we had received a grant from Lloyd K. Johnson a few years back to add archival storage in that area as well, mainly for the art, but it's packed full with a lot of the museum collections as well. So when we have activities and whatnot, it's quite hard to move around. And we just, at this time, really do not have any additional capacity to accept any more artifacts. You know, we're kind of shooting for the images and oral histories, things that we can take in digitally, but we run out of room. And that's kind of worrisome, because that's our mission, is to care for those, collect them and care for them. So I'm going to turn it over to Myron to talk about other storage needs.
Well, the segue is the picture on the county storage needs, and I happen to be standing smiling, and I don't know why I should be smiling, but Kerry Johnson and Brady Powers and I toured the facilities. Just for a little background, I was the county commissioner that served on the capital improvement committee 4 or 5 years ago, I guess that started. And so you're continuing to do the good work, and I think you're doing it a lot better. As you all know, we sort of got sidetracked on adding jail cells, and that didn't work out too well. So thanks especially to James Yorkie for, I think, his leadership, and to all of you. You have this back on track, and maybe you're doing a lot better than we did, but we tried for the time. So, but at that time, I toured all the facilities with various some engineers and an architect, and so had a look at the storage needs here in the courthouse. And I don't know if things have changed, but at that time when I was there was evidence of a lot of dampness, mold, mildew, and of course, I'm not going to say any more, but this is not appropriate for our archives for the county, and I'm sure you all know that. So in working with us, hopefully we can satisfy both our needs, because quite frankly, our needs are a lot worse. We have water in some of our storage areas. I don't know if you have water down there, but I think also maybe there might be a need for archival storage in the community with other organizations, maybe other historical societies as well. And I just mention that to sort of move into what are the needs of archival storage. And I'll just make a few comments, or actually try to just give you some recommendations from the Society of American Archives. So as you get an idea what we have as a goal in building this facility, if we go forward, these are the kinds of things we kept in mind and we'll have to keep in mind. And if we work with the county, we'd have to make some modifications, I think, as well, just for security, access, and those other things. So some of the things that space requirements really, will vary by size and so forth, but we think we have something that would be adequate for our future. You should plan ahead 5 to 10 years as well in archival needs. And part of the business plan certainly could be providing some kind of service to the county, the citizens, or whatever organizations that would want to maintain the facilities. And that might be something to be explored. I think the downside of that is it would require staffing, and so that always has to be weighed. But these are the things that sort of went into the background of planning the facility. To be fire resistant, fireproof building with all the suppression systems and all of those built in. And of course I think that's quite common. But the most important thing is to maintain a temperature, and usually that is about 60 to 70 degrees and a humidity of 40 to 50%, and that should be constant. That's just not, that should, so all of those variables, temperature and humidity, should have an HVAC system that holds that very steady, and that's the whole idea with not having fluctuation. Definitely a security system, and especially with the county, that would be very important, because you would more likely have to have sections and so forth that you would want no one else to have access to. Windows and fluorescent lighting and so forth like that should have appropriate ultraviolet light filter screens and so forth, because that has should have a loading dock, should actually have running water and so forth, and all of the electrical and other kinds of devices that you need for computers and other systems. And also to have be built structurally so that you don't have any potential water pipes leaking or any kind of wet or drainage system. So that is very important, otherwise you're wasting your money on any other system that you put in there. So you have to really build it quite carefully as far as wetland delineation and so forth. Then there needs to be administration areas, work areas, reference areas, and the storage areas themselves should have some flexible kinds of shelving. And I found out that those shelving materials really need to be of a certain composition so that there's less deterioration of whatever. And you should have for large objects and small objects as well. And that, I think, is it. Any questions about, maybe this would be an appropriate time if you have any questions about what the facility should do.
You know, one thing I had looked at in the past are some of the renderings of a design, and that one thing that was being considered was a shed roof to make sure that we didn't have buildup of snow, thinking about recent roof collapses and water issues. Is that something you're still thinking about?
There was some, I could speak to that, but someone else go ahead too. I mean,
That is still,
yeah.
at the
there's-
50% design, it was still a
The
shed roof.
50%?
Yeah, 50, so I would say with this 50% design, I myself have got some experience with public buildings, schools. I don't know, if we went into this, I think we'd have to look at some other options, and that could be one. There's pros and cons with everything, there's definitely, and we had I was on the facilities committee at that time, and we had a lot of discussion about the pros and cons of that shed roof. So there's, there's arguments.
When you're talking about a shed roof, you're not talking about a shed roof where it goes straight up and then it's just, that is the least structurally and sound type of roof to have in this county with this snow road.
That was one of the discussions.
That's why I
Yeah.
brought
You
it up.
absolutely do not want to build that here unless you are now going to, because of the ledge rock, you're going to drill down, you'll have to anchor that in many places for the, no, you don't want a shed roof.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you. The architect didn't, but, so they proposed that, but there was a lot of discussion. And I agree with you, Debbie.
It will increase the price of that roof ridiculously, a ridiculous amount for the amount of structural engineering that will have to be added to that, to make that happen. And did anyone contract like a Morton Buildings? Because they design,
Yeah.
they have all this experience, and they don't cost the same amount as the services you get from an architect. Granted, you're committed to an architect, but at some point, maybe.
We did
why?
consider that. In the facilities committee, there was discussion of the Morton building.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah, and actually, I think one of our members of it, I think it was Dwayne Aggie, I'm not sure. I think it was Dwayne, that has a lot of experience with buildings in the county, and he had done some work on it. And that was very preliminary, but as we went through the process, we sort of ended up with an architectural design by a firm that recommended this. And that's where we stopped, because we didn't want to spend any more money at that time. So I think your points are well taken, and I personally agree with them. But if we went into this, I would think that we would look at what we got and definitely consider modifications, and the county would be part of that.
I think for funding purposes, we had to sign up with an architect and get the true reports and everything. It couldn't just be estimations. And so that's how we got started with LHB. That took us through the 50% design. Didn't really end up with what we, it ended up more than what we needed. We knew we could probably build it at a lesser cost and a different design, but at least we got the civil engineering plan. We got to that stage.
Commissioner Storley, you had a remark.
Thank you. So the design that you have here, how big is the building that you're thinking about?
I believe it's 40 by 80. No, it doesn't say. I believe it's a 40 by 80 structure that's shown, yeah.
And that was just for our needs, so
Yeah.
if we partnered with the county and there was storage that you needed, we would have to add on to that, like, the other half of the building, and would be great.
So this building would serve all kinds of purposes beyond storage. You'd have a place you could go and work when you needed to sort things through, and so nothing would be stored at the actual museum. You're hoping that it'll all go here because of the water considerations.
Right.
Yes, we might have some of the more valuable items possibly stay at the museum.
But
yeah.
basically, the basement would be clear.
Basement would be clear. Yep.
That would be very nice. We wouldn't need to be asking the high school football team to come over and remove things and bring them up from the basement again.
Madam Chair, may I just wanted to add, I met yesterday with Rowan Watkins, who's our IT director, to talk about issues related to file storage. We do have a number of files, as you pointed out, in this building that have to be, are required by statute to be stored for some period of years. In public health and services, there are records that we have to keep for 10 years. And most of those files right now are in a paper format. And I was talking with Rowan about, what are the opportunities to digitize that stuff and get rid of the paper, because it is under the state's authority. We have limited ability to decide what we can keep in paper and what we can't. But in terms of what our needs might be moving forward, we have a great deal of information that we need to keep. We have historical documents that we're just not going to get rid of. And so, but there is a question about moving forward. Can we digitize processes so that we're not having to keep as much paper? And then also for the hard copy files that we do have currently, what's the opportunity for reducing the volume by digitizing those documents? So still some work that we have to do there to kind of quantify what those needs would be. But from my perspective, working on the capital improvement plan, I can see there being value in our having this discussion and maybe trying to scope out what a shared facility might look like. So.
Would you be including, law enforcement has their own storage needs?
That could be part of it, too.
That would be part of it,
It
too.
could,
So
yeah.
how big is the lot and what are the setbacks? How large a building can you get in that space?
There's room for something bigger than what we have
Yeah.
listed here. I don't have the exact numbers, but I would bet that we could double it. It depends on the environmental survey as well.
We have very little
So-
wetland areas in that particular parcel, so we could
Yeah.
go quite a bit bigger than what
We
is shown.
should go to the east.
Do you remember how big the parcel is?
I do not.
I don't either.
I could draw it
I
out,
don't know
but I
if
can't think of the
evidence
size.
storage could be included in that. There's a different level of security that would be required, so that's something
Build
we have to.
interior walls and you put a lot of locks and security
Sure.
equipment in there and
We just have to make sure that we're meeting all those requirements.
I would think that just based upon what we have done, and if we, pursue further study, that we would need to look at that current building design that we have, because I don't think it would be, I think there would need to be some changes, just with the roof change that's going to affect water runoff, and there was a withholding area, so I would think that it would be worthwhile to have a group formed that would really look at the needs and say, okay, we'll have to work with an architect to say, okay, how can you structure this in such a way to meet our needs? And then there would be a cost, but.
Well,
I think we have
obviously,
lots.
right now is a really good time to be having this discussion because we're looking at our capital improvement plan. We've collected a lot of information, and so it's really timely discussion. So I really appreciate the fact that we're having these conversations and can think about how we can work collaboratively, and working together is always a smarter, better, more efficient way to do things.
Yeah, and just to, I'll finish up our presentation here. Well, now I don't know what page I'm on. Currently, the Historical Society manages, preserves, and interprets 2 county-owned properties. That would be the museum and Bolly's Blacksmith Shop. So we already have that collaboration in place. The Historical Society has already invested $76,000 into this archival storage project. We continue to pursue bonding. We were not included in the one that just passed, of course. But our bill has been presented, and we did have a hearing last year, so it's my understanding that that still holds because it's still the same bill. So hopefully in the next year or two, we asked for 2.1 million, which would build the archival storage. It would help with the Chippewa City Church, the museum, Bollies, and the Johnson Heritage Post. We also have hired grant writers, so they're continually looking for grants that we can apply for to also help with those, as well as some staffing needs and whatnot. I also, Myron found for me the Minnesota statutes of what counties and historical societies can do together. I don't know if you have this or not, but I sadly only had one printed, but you can share, or maybe someone else can print, and it lists the extra special relationships that the county can have with the historical society, which we already have part of it. Given that we manage 2 properties for you already.
Commissioner Stoll.
Thank you. Could you refresh our memory on how much the county gives to the Historical Society?
I believe this, last year we were at 72, 4, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Has that changed over the years?
It has. We've been able to get a little bit of an increase the past couple of years for that.
We were 68 a few years ago.
Yeah.
And how often do you come before us? I forget that too.
Annually.
Annually is what we're supposed to do.
Supposed to do, okay.
And I
Yeah.
want to thank you because you are one of the organizations that always comes on an annual basis. Except when we had nothing going on during the
Right.
pandemic, you're always here, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we all need copies of this,
Yeah.
at least
Mhm.
some of us need a copy to refresh our memory on that.
Yeah, and it may also help in thinking of where we can get funding if we partner up. It may open up some other opportunities or provide more support. I mean, you already provided a letter of support for our bill, but it just may give a little extra oomph to it as well.
Bonding is so ridiculous this year because they have to make up for the bonding that they didn't issue. This is not a bonding year, but they may be doing cash, so you might still be.
Yeah, cash would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Cash is always good.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yeah, and there aren't a lot of grants out there that we've found anyway that go up to the dollar amount that we're looking for, or we're just not quite a right fit, or it's some national federal grant that is super competitive. Haven't gotten that, but so.
Well, I'll make certain to get this information out to everybody on these statutes, just so everybody has a copy for their records.
Commissioner, what's the price tag on this building at this moment, as per architect? I mean, even
About-
I was giving you an, you said, they didn't want an estimate, they wanted something more solid from an architect.
About
That's a
800,000.
fallacy. Don't think that the architect can give you a number that's accurate.
Yeah.
$800,000?
Correct.
807,500.
When we started the project, I believe it was estimated we could do this for about $250,000.
Yes, that's the number I recall.
How's the Morton building?
That was a Morton
And
building.
so what was wrong with the Morton building and their engineering and their design inside? Because I happen to know, when I say Morton building, I don't know if it's that brand name, but I know of one off the Arrowhead Trail. I mean, we probably have it with the highway department, that we could almost put the courthouse into it. And it's, you have all of this space, you could easily subdivide it, and I don't know what that would have cost you, but $800,000 seems like an awful lot of money.
It-
And what percentage goes to the architect?
Right. I think it went a little off track.
60,000 so far.
Yeah.
So far. And that's only gonna keep going.
Right, it's a nightmare. The 250 did not include like all the environmental stuff and
Right.
digging up in the pond we have to have, and
The civil engineering comes to 230-some thousand.
Yeah.
yeah.
Per their estimate, again.
Yes.
And, you know, we could probably do much better than that, but those are the numbers that we had to work on so far. The Morton, I think one of the main concerns with the Morton was keeping rodents out. I don't think it was quite as sealed of an envelope, but,
Is that not what Harley Tofty had for his fish house?
Mhm. Yeah,
There
that
would be a
was,
rodent concerned about having it in their foods.
There were issues that I recall that were related to rodents, a lot of pests. When you're dealing with items that the Historical Society has, you have to think about insects.
Oh, yes.
And so they're very, very specialized temperature and humidity controls that were included
yeah, I think
in the discussion.
like a Morton building possibly could be used. I mean, we just need a building, but it's all that infrastructure within the
Inside.
building that is going to be so expensive because of the humidity control, the security, the fire suppression, all of that kind of stuff, and those systems where we really need a professional there to come up with a design for us. LHB hasn't even gotten that far, and if you have any recommendations for anyone else we could possibly use, I would be thrilled to hear about them, especially if there's someone who has designed museums or,
I'll get back to you on that.
okay.
and I did not include all the building information in the quotes in this presentation, but I'd be happy to send those along.
Okay, if you want to
Okay.
send those, and then I can make sure they get distributed. That would be great. Other questions or comments? Commissioner
Well, I
Hawkins?
guess, so the county in our budget discussions has given $72,000 to this historical society. We also, that is not our end cost as county, because as you said, they're county-owned properties. So we do spend more money to take care of those.
By the way, the
Properties.
sump pump's been broken for a while, and the
Yes.
septic, and
Which goes back to the capital improvement process and the number of county buildings in the county, and I'm wondering if you can give explanation of why the county owns historical society buildings, when in other counties, that's not true.
I don't know the history of how that started, I'm assuming that was the Historical Society and the county getting together many, many years ago. Because in that statute, it says that counties can own properties for historical societies to be for storing historical stuff. Someone grabbed onto that a long time ago, or maybe the county always had the lighthouse property. And the county did buy Bollies here a few years ago.
Yeah, I have a problem with that one too, so.
Right.
I think that was a bad decision on the county's part, but.
And it was supposed to, at some point, get signed over to us, was what I have heard.
I can't find that in writing anywhere, but that's the story everybody tells me. But we
Yeah.
have spent quite a bit, we paid for the siding repairs this last summer for Bollies, just to get that done, and we do take care of whatever we can.
I know that other counties own buildings, but I don't think it's that common.
Yeah,
But I know St. Louis County, there's a lot of counties in the
There's
state
some.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Some counties own properties, others don't. Some counties provide support, financial support for positions or, that type of thing within historical societies. So there's a lot of variety within the state of Minnesota. But I think the important point is we're here talking together, we're collaborating, we're looking at how we can do what we all need, the work that we need to have done, and work together to be efficient. And I appreciate that conversation. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Marais.
Madam Chair, I did note in the statute that was passed around that we can collect 2.418% of the estimated market value for historical societies. So that's of all the property in the county. So that's nothing to sneeze at, but it's just interesting to see what was written in statute of what we are and are not able to do. So it gives some perspective on what our limitations are. Still, that's a large limit, but it's there. So just that was
Commissioner
Commissioner
Mills,
White.
we can collect that from whom?
the taxpayers.
Oh, from the taxpayers. Okay, just wanted to clarify that we could tack that on some more. to the tax-
2.148%, so the state statute says for historical societies. That, you know, like I said, that's a lot of money, but it is limited. So I just thought that was interesting.
We'll make sure to get that statutory information shared with everybody, and if you want to send me more information on the buildings, we'll get that distributed as well. Commissioner White.
Are you having a subcommittee about this building project? I mean, I'd be very interested in.
I would say it's on hold at the moment. We do have a facilities committee which does discuss it. But without funding and with a possible partnership with the county, I feel that it's kind of we're just gonna pause for a moment and see where things shake out and go from there. But it would be great to, if the county wants to partner, I think that there should be a, county historical society committee that specifically talks about just the storage.
Thank you, Commissioner White, and I think that that's something that we could talk about. I think we as a single organization right now are sort of on hold, as was mentioned, but we're really welcome to attend if we can work some kind of structure and how we could process this as a collaboration. And that'll be sort of up to you folks, I think, as well as how we can accommodate that.
Oh,
Commissioner White.
if the county can be part of this storage building and moving our huge collection of required paper information to another facility, that would make office space seem a lot bigger if you're not crowded out. So that would reduce the need for additional space, I mean, possibly here, because I took a tour of the law enforcement. I have not of social services here, but law enforcement is kind of, the walls are somewhere behind the 3 layers of shelving with material on it. So it really needs to be decided if this would be a good idea before anything goes forward. But it should be considered as part of a capital improvement plan, because whatever the cost is, it's like huge.
I will say the concept for expanding the law enforcement center into a justice center includes the addition of space for evidence storage, for example, and processing. Operationally, it would be preferable to keep that function there because it's already a secured building, the proximity to the sheriff's office. I think, I'm not sure that specific use would be a good fit, but there are other document storage needs that we have, so.
And I would assume that this building will be secured in more than one way, so whatever's in there, it's going to have security, but in any place, if somebody wants to go in, they're going in, no matter.
But we'll know about it.
So,
All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time to update us and think about collaborating on archival storage.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
And I will research, I'll find out if there are, what architects or who might know about building buildings, storage buildings for historical societies specifically.
Yeah, if you have any leads, that would be lovely.
I'll go find some.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thanks, guys.
All right. Moving on. The next item on our agenda is to talk about the potential merger of Cook County Grand Marais Economic Development Authority and the Cook County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And so we have 3 chairs here. Do we need a 4th chair? 3 chairs right here for the group to come forward. Good morning. And we have snacks.
Food. Those are from the new meat process, Commissioner Hawkins brought these from the new meat processing facility at the Northeast
At NERC.
Regional Collections.
Oh, at NERC.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, grab one on my way out, I'll grab one.
It's hard to speak and chew at the same time.
Yeah. Commissioner White, just quickly, I would say Tim Cochran knows a lot about architects for archival storage. He
Okay.
did that project at Grand Portage National Monument.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was able to tour that facility with him right after it was built, so, sorry, I digress.
Thank you.
It's a good lead, though.
Yes.
Commissioners, thanks for having us here today. It's a pleasure to be here. I understand we have a limited amount of time today, and so I'm hoping that you all received the packets that
We
we
did.
sent out and have had a chance to review those. I'm not going to go through everything that's in the package here. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then mostly we're interested in fielding questions that you might have and having some discussion, if that works for you guys. Okay, as you guys all know, Beth Drost resigned from her position as the EDA director in January of this year, and that created an opportunity for both the EDA and the HRA to take a look and discuss whether or not a merger between the 2 organizations was warranted. There were a great deal of community members that reached out to me directly as the chair of the EDA and encouraged me to take a look at that and to think about that. And so that led the process that we started, where both the HRA and the EDA boards met and talked amongst themselves. Then they met together 2 separate times, fielded a bunch of questions that both organizations had. And then we've been out in the community talking to a bunch of community members about questions and concerns that they might have. At this point in time, both of the HRA and the EDA organizations have passed resolutions after this study has happened, and they're both making the recommendation for the 2 organizations to merge, and for Jason Hale to take the helm of those merged organizations. What's left to happen is we have to come before the county and we have to come before the city, and both of those organizations have to bless the merger and approve it. And we want to make sure that if we continue to go down this path, that it is in the best interest of both the city and the county, and that everyone feels good about it. And we're here to answer questions and talk about it today. And we also have the interim director for the EDA, Pat Campanero, is here, and Jason Hale is here as well. So they are also able to answer questions in addition to us.
Commissioner Stordo.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. 2-part question. What did your study consist of?
So we took a look, both organizations met alone, and they met together twice. We've taken a look at the budgets of both organizations. We've taken a look at what a possible org chart might look like, which is in the packet here. And we've talked about the priorities of both organizations and how we make sure that the missions of the EDA and the HRA continue to move forward in this community, because both of those missions are critical to the community, we feel.
And Mary, I'll direct it to you. You have vast experience in working with EDA. Do you think that your job description in running EDA can also be expanded to also include HRA housing?
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. I would say, back when we began to talk about creating the HRA, it was going to be one organization with 2 professional employees. And then at some point in time, we decided as a community to make it 2 separate organizations because we wanted to make space for more leaders to become engaged in the housing solutions. Now we're at a place where we're looking at, again, one organization with 2 professional employees. So I would never tell you to go back to have one person do all the work. Never. Super bad idea. But one board overseeing 2 employees makes sense to me. Either way, 2 boards, 2 employees, 1 board, 2 employees. It's the same. I think the most important, the operative part of that is 2 professional employees working together on these issues for Cook County, which that's what we're saying. Jason would be the executive director of the merged organization, and the board and Jason would hire another professional person that has the talents and skills and abilities to do the kind of work that we do, or I did and he does now.
Okay, thank you.
And as we look across Minnesota, it's very common for EDAs and HRAs to be under one umbrella. In fact, it's more common for it to be organized in that fashion rather than 2 separate organizations.
Other questions? Commissioner Mills?
Just a point of clarification there. The one board would be supervising 1 employee, not 2.
No. Because the
Right,
executive
I think
director will
structure-
supervise
yeah,
the
I think
second.
the structure is a very important part of
Yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation.
Thank you.
And it just leads me to the kind of the concerns that I've had is we really need to support our director.
Yeah.
Or if and when we have 2 directors, our directors, right? Just with the resources and the staffing that they need to be able to do the job of both the HRA and the EDA, so.
Yeah.
But that was just detail I wanted to.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that clarification. That is correct. The executive director would supervise the program manager or the development director or whatever the title is going to be of the second position. The point that I intended to make was that it would be another professional, high-level, full-time professional position with the appropriate talents, skills, and abilities to do the work. Thank you for clarifying.
I have some other questions, Commissioner Storley.
So that brings up the question about a board. Would you reshuffle and have a new board? And would it be a larger board?
So by state statute, the board is set at 7 members for the EDA. And so the exact way that this would happen is that the HRA would fold back underneath the EDA authority, and then it would be 7 board members. If you look at page 5 of the packet here, you'll see the current board members and then the proposed board members of what we are hoping we'll end up with.
I asked some questions for the public
Yeah.
to understand too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is important, that you reshuffle the board and maybe add a couple new people or whatever, maybe somebody retires or however that goes.
Yep, it'll require 2 folks, one from the HRA and one for the EDA, where they would have turned out at the end of this year. Those 2 folks, one on either side, will take an early retirement from those boards in order so that we don't exceed the 7.
And does that include 1 commissioner?
Nope.
No commissioner.
We're proposing, we have currently Commissioner Mills appointed to the EDA and Commissioner Hawkins as ex officio to the HRA, and we're proposing to request that we keep both of them as ex officio to the merged board because they bring so much to the work that we do.
Commissioner Hawkins.
and I'll just share that I have a problem with that one. I really think there needs to be at least one commissioner on the board
Oh, okay.
or a vote. The city gets a vote, the county should have a vote, and if we want to have a second ex officio, I'm okay.
Or it could
The
be
county
like a
needs to have somebody
primary and
that
an alternate.
has a vote there.
Okay. We'll
We'll figure that out.
take that back to the drawing board.
Well, that's one opinion. I disagree strongly. Parks and Trails Commission, the city has a vote, Grand Portage has a vote, and then we have other members that have votes, and the commissioner is ex officio. In all of my committees, there's not a one where I'm ex officio and don't have a voice. And we eventually have the final vote. So I'm, do we not have the final vote?
Well, not really. No, we don't. Not really on their work. We have, they present a budget to us and we accept it. That's all we get. We get no say in the actual work that is gonna, like today's meeting this afternoon. We don't have any say over that.
But you do
did
at this
before
time.
it got there.
You do.
I still do.
As
this.
a vote, yes.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
why
kind of like
it's
how
important.
Congress works, where the House of Representatives controls the purse strings, right? So we as the county board control the purse strings, and typically, when there's that control, the corresponding boards listen pretty well. And I think it's a good way to separate things out and kind of distribute the voices. But again, one opinion, that's only two opinions, so there's others that need to be discussed, and that's why we're having this meeting today.
Commissioner White.
Which goes back to the very first question, or the very first presentation that here about, we really need to have an HRA person, one person who will focus exclusively on housing, exclusively. And now it's okay, so we create a position, we fund the position, we have Jason doing this, and now it's being considered that, oh, well, we were just kidding. We don't, he can do both. Is that? I mean, I'm talking public perception. Because that was the whole thing. We need one person who will do that, because the EDA, people ask, well, what has the EDA done? Because I'm talking people that pay attention to what's going on in the county. And so, and people are paying attention to the HRA, to housing. And so the question is, what has the EDA done, and why are we encumbering the HRA person to now have to be part of EDA? It's the question that should be addressed and explained. Why? I mean, you lost an employee when Beth left. So why not just replace her?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anytime there's a high-level position that's gone or left, it's really important to evaluate that, and there was calls from the public to do that. I had that, it wasn't my first reaction when I heard that Beth was leaving, but it was a close second, and then shared the idea with both Administrator Yorkie and Commissioner Sullivan, who also separately had been talking about it. So I was like, okay, I'm glad there's talk about it. Well, literally after I left the courthouse, I got a call from Steve gingerly asking about this idea. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of people thinking about that, and it is a good practice when there's a leadership change to reevaluate things. So when you think back to when the HRA was formed and the things that have changed since then, A, there's a board for the HRA. We didn't have that before. B, there's a director for the HRA. We didn't have that before. The city council has changed. The county board has changed. And the one thing that has not changed is our need for housing. But there's a lot of changes, and considering the talent and the expertise that we have in the current position, my thinking is that we leverage that and give the supports and resources that they need to be as productive and accomplished as possible. And some of that is being to be flexible and to move things around, leverage resources around as need be, instead of having your hands tied like, nope, this is my lane, I can't look, I mean, I can look over there, but I can't do over there. Versus like, all right, we've got 2 lanes to drive down this road and we can pass people and shift lanes or shift back, and I just see that flexibility as a real asset. The other thing, back with the formation of the HRA, was at that time, there was a lot of push for the EDA to take on those responsibilities, and I certainly saw the value at that time. I also heard enough from the public about having that distinct role, right? That separation, because of the encumbrance, as you put it. And I think there is value in that, and it was a much easier thing for us to do, to make the HRA, honestly, than to go through the entire process, kind of like we are now, to adding another position to the EDA. And so in my mind, it was just the flow of water.
And Commissioner White, one of the things I was thinking about in relationship to your question, and it's a lot like the school district. When we have had administrators leave, we have reevaluated the organizational structure of that group. And so instead of looking at the school district, now we're looking at the EDA, the HRA, just like we would a principal and a superintendent, and we're trying to reconfigure duties, and we've been given an opportunity to examine our organizational structure and what we can do with the leadership that we have in place. And so I think that's the way to think about it. It's an opportunity to rethink. Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. So I'm doing a little drawing here of Jason as the head of the organization with 1 employee being hired and a board. What are you looking at for budget?
So we've taken a look at the budgets of both organizations, and certainly since the levy has already been set for '23, the organization will live with the combined budget of the HRA EDA. Looking forward to next year, there's been some talk, and as the projects, particularly with the HRA unfold, there's been some talk of maybe the budget will have to change a little bit going forward. But no work at this point has been started on a '24 budget, so.
Commissioner Hawkins.
I was hoping Brady was going to be here today to answer budget questions, but did we figure out the $60,000 and where it's coming from and where it's going?
Yep, so we have a revised combined budget that calls out that $60,000 comes out. Yep.
Where does it come from?
So it was in the EDA budget to begin with, it just was in a larger bucket on that line item, and so we've split it out so that it's very specifically called out so that it's gonna go.
Well, that's why I'm confused here of the sources of funds for '23 on your proposed merged budget. 295 is the EDA budget and levy. That's our levy we agreed to in September. And then it says 60,000 levy pass-through for county payment. So where is it coming from? I still don't, I'm not clear.
I believe, my understanding, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I did this for 5 years. The $295,000 is what the county board approved for the EDA operating levy. And the county approved the 60,000, so a total of 355.
I can't find any record of us approving the 60,000, and so is that county 60, like, this is where I wish Brady was here right now. Where does that 60,000, what pot of money does it come out of? What fund does it come out of? Where does it?
Maybe we need, so I'm speaking historically what happened, Commissioner Hawkins. The total budget approved by the county board would have been 355.
But we specifically, this is, I've had,
Okay.
I've had an issue with the EDA budget for quite a while, financials. No, I get,
Yeah.
things are working better now, but this is still a concern that what we say and what's on paper maybe not exactly
Okay.
aligned.
thank you so much for pointing this out. We do need total, absolute clarity about what was literally approved for the EDA, including the 60,000. I would say, if the assumption that we worked on was wrong, that we will just reduce where it says direct project assistance, we just have to reduce that by 60,000 and take it out of that line item, because the commitment will be kept. Absolutely. The commitment is for those who, this might be helpful. Before I came to the EDA, the county board made a commitment to help the city pay the debt service for Cedar Grove Business Park. And the county, it's one of the most complicated legal documents I've read. None of us really can hardly understand what it says, but at the end of the day, what happens is the county forwards $60,000 a year to the EDA, and the EDA forwards that money to the city of Grand Marais. And that's the county's participation in the debt service on the bond that built the business park. And the EDA receives property tax statements, a stack of them for every lot in the business park that has not yet been sold. And it's called a special assessment, and that's what it's paid. So, yay.
We switched it on you, we were gonna meet in the other.
You're always here. Yeah.
So I hope that's helpful, to explain what is the 60 that we're talking about, what's it for? Why does it be a part of this conversation? And absolute commitment that it will be paid out of these funds. But Brady, tell us.
Where does it come from, Brady?
So can you say, did the county board approve a 2023 levy for the EDA of $295 or $355?
$295 total.
Okay, then we just need to take it out of the other money.
Includes the 60. Yeah.
Includes the 60. Very good.
So you've explained all the background.
I have,
Okay.
I believe, but
The 60
please.
going to the city for the payment on the business.
on the
part.
business.
Yeah,
Yes.
that came as a request by the city to the county board, and they just agreed to put 60,000 a year towards that, which was roughly half the bond payment.
Right, and that goes way back historically.
Oh, yeah, this is over 10 years ago, or around that. And so they agreed to do that, but through the EDA levy, because it's related to the EDA project.
Okay, so we'll just take it out of this other line and we'll make that
And
adjustment.
it's always been confusing for the budgeting, because the EDA board has never considered it as part of their levy
Right.
by.
It's not, yeah.
Because it's just a
I
is.
question,
But it
okay,
is.
that's what I was
It
gonna
isn't-
question is.
Yeah, it isn't part of their, let's say, operational levy, but it is part of their levy, so.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've tried to explain to the EDA board for a long time, is that the levy and the EDA budget aren't the same thing. Because in addition to the levy, the EDA leverages funds from other sources, which go into its annual operating budget as pass-throughs like this. But we don't need to clarify that right now. You know what I'm talking, like IRRB grants are part of the operating of the annual operating of the EDA, but it has nothing to do with the levy. So
And I think it was really important to clarify that 60 grand.
This is-
Because it
Because
cuts it.
trying to get this cleared out.
all right. I am so grateful to you, Commissioner Hawkins, for always bringing the hard questions, because we need to answer them. That's fabulous.
But I have one more.
Yes.
And it's budget also. Depending on the day of the week, I go back and forth, good idea, ooh, hesitation. So just know I'm still processing. I think overall it's probably a good idea, but I'm still concerned about combining both groups in light of the debt of the EDA. And have we figured out updated financials and a plan for the debt that the EDA has already incurred. I don't want to take away from our 750,000 we just gave the HRA for housing to somehow get wrapped up into what that EDA owes. Have we thought about how to do that?
Sorry, just.
Come on out.
Please.
I just want to let you know it can't be.
They can't be.
Okay.
Right.
Those funds are reserved for housing, and actually the American Rescue Plan Act restricts what you can spend those funds on, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
And can you confirm which debt?
Well, they owe the county for a loan,
The 100,000, I think, is
and
the
then
balance.
Perry National owned,
The debt service for the
yeah,
golf
for
course.
the golf course, yeah. So I just was worried about what that means financially when we want to say housing's priority.
Commissioner White.
So what does the county, do we levy, is the levy the sum total of the amount that is directed to the EDA?
And the HRA.
Well, the HRA,
This 295 is the EDA levy, 259 is the HRA.
Right.
For this year.
for this, that's the sum total, and is that, does the city contribute to the EDA? That was the original, it wasn't ever part of the, of any of it, it's all county.
The city, I think, when I came, I was told that the residents who live in the city pay county taxes and they contribute to the EDA via their residence in the county and their
They
pay.
do. Everybody pays the county tax rate. So,
It was just a clarification, something was said.
yeah.
Well, I think that's where that 60,000 originally came from. That was the city's portion of the levy. And then it just got rolled in. But then it was unclear of,
Well, the city went, they didn't go through as a joint effort on that BDA project, so they were paying the bond payment themselves, but collecting through sales. But the sales weren't happening very fast, and they asked the county to contribute in order to pay it off quicker. And it eventually is all theoretical, paid by the sales of those lots.
yeah, and, you know, really, this hand or this hand, it doesn't matter. I'm fine with, it's just make sure it's clear that this goes back to the organizational structure, and we're letting the city have a vote and saying, oh, the county doesn't need a vote. Oh, wait a minute, it's county taxpayers that are making it possible for this to happen. I think we deserve a seat at the table with a vote.
Well, it's funny because I agree with you to almost that whole thing. It's not that I would think the city shouldn't have a city, I don't think the need for a city council member or, you know, a city official on the vote. But it's like a tit for tat sort of thing, I don't think that should happen, and I don't think the county should have a vote at the table. But because the city doesn't make me think the county should. It still makes me think the city shouldn't and the county shouldn't. So my strategy is kind of like best foot forward, lead by example. This should work. You know me. I know you.
Yeah, we're gonna be on opposite sides of this when the dust settles, I know that.
Commissioner White.
So does the city have a financial obligation or encumbrance for the business park yet, or for, and so who owns the business park? I mean, is that the city property, the EDA?
The EDA owns it, but the city owns the debt service.
Nice and clean.
Can somebody explain that?
So every time there's a lot sale, the proceeds of the lot go directly to the city because the city has the debt service.
I can't explain it, Commissioner White. It happened in 2005, whatever happened back then. I don't know, Brady, I don't even think, were you here then to?
Oh, yeah.
I was
Yeah,
here.
he was here.
I
But-
wasn't, yeah, I
Florida,
wasn't
though.
involved in the details.
I don't know how it happened that it's, like, we know the EDA owns the golf course because it was created for the purpose of owning the land for the golf course. I don't know, I never went back through the historic records to find how it happened that the EDA owns or is responsible for, I don't know, the unsold lots in Cedar Grove. But I can provide you that really complicated legal document remember that legal document? that
No.
None of us, it describes the relationship of the county and the city and the EDA and how the money goes back and forth between them all and
Yeah.
like, that's the history, but I don't understand it. I only know that we passed through that money to the city through
So what is the debt obligation yet?
the balance on the bond. I don't know that number, I'm sorry.
We'd have to ask the city. They own the bonds, so we don't have that
Yeah.
information.
Okay.
We only have the Superior National.
And we can ask them, we
Well,
don't need,
Yeah.
It's a curiosity, I mean, it's like, so how much debt is would the county gain? I mean, or accrue by putting HRA and EDA together?
None.
It's, yeah, it's
Nothing.
None.
no more.
I just want to make sure. but
Yeah.
didn't get eaten up in
The business park, the bond that was in 04, 05, maybe for Cedar Grove, and was probably like a 20-year, I don't know, maybe it was a 30-year,
Yeah, we should get the information and come back with that.
I'll make a note.
Rather than guess.
I'll make a note.
I can give you a lot of thoughts I have on that too, but I'd rather have it.
Correct. Okay, we'll get that.
Just wanted to correct the case, did you say the levy for the HRA or just the expenses for the HRA? For 20?
Oh, budget and levy, it says here, 259.
So, yeah, we actually levied 125. So the other 100 in their budget is,
EDA money, that's why
It's
this
the
is
housing
confusing.
project.
yeah.
It's, yeah, so the numbers don't add up.
All right. We're gonna fine tune those numbers, because we're not going forward without knowing that we understand the right numbers
Yeah.
either.
Commissioner Storley, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. So I understand after Beth left that there was a pause, and then there was the conversation that started with EDA and when we hired Jason. I'm just wondering Jason's thoughts. How comfortable are you with this possibility of?
Commissioner, I just work here.
That's a great answer.
I serve at the pleasure of my board or a future board.
Okay, so you've had a chance to think this through.
Quite a few chances, yes.
Quite a few chances. That's, I just feel that, we hired you with the idea that we really needed to work with housing because we as a board cannot build homes. And you're doing a fantastic job with that. And I just don't want to see things kind of get a little confused about, well, today I got to be this, but I really need to do that with EDA. And I understand that hiring a really good employer along with your position is really important. That can carry a load for EDA so Jason can work on housing. Is that clear? I mean, is that what perception I should be
Yep.
getting? Okay.
And
If I may, there's gonna be times where the priority of Jason's is the EDA, but the idea is that there's gonna be professional, be like, hey, there's this housing thing that I'm working on, go do that, or we're working on, or it's more of the we, and the director being able to have the tools to do what's most effective and leverage everything, but both boards share your concern 100% that we do not want to detract from our housing projects, we want to build those and build more and more potential. So there's going to be a lot more talks about how we do that, how we support, and that's going to get into the budgeting for sure.
And I think where the EDA was before, they did housing projects.
Right.
So Mary has
Right.
experience, it's been done there, we just decided we wanted to do more,
Mhm.
so we hired another person. So could it go back to being one director and with help, because Mary couldn't take on anymore when she was director? Yeah,
Part-time, yeah.
that's why I can see it could work.
Right.
We just need to make sure we're all using the same numbers and everything is totally clear.
Steve, you had a question or a
I
comment?
was just going to further clarify what Dave said. I mean, there's no more economic important issue for Cook County right now than housing, and that is crystal clear with both boards. The EDA certainly has some other responsibilities that we've committed to over the years that we are not going to drop and cannot drop and have to stay focused on. You know, we have some responsibilities around the business park, as we've heard today. We have responsibilities around the golf course, as we've heard today. We also have childcare, which is very important to the community and to the EDA, and so those projects need to be continued to push forward. But if one issue had to rise to the top, that certainly is housing, and I think all of us in this room understand and believe that, and the board members that are currently part of the EDA certainly believe housing is important and want to put their energies behind housing as well.
Absolutely. Commissioner White?
So when you talk about having two professionals, full-time, who pays for the second professional?
So currently in the two different budgets between the EDA and the HRA right now, we have money allocated for a professional for each organization. So if it's a combined board, it's still two people out of the two combined budgets.
So the budget would not be reduced at all?
This is not a money-saving endeavor.
Okay.
Which has also been a conversation, because I like to talk about efficiencies, right? And there's the financial efficiencies at times, but then there's also the energy efficiencies or the symbiosis, the synergy that can be, added with combining. So there's different levels of synergy. Madam Chair, if you could sit up here.
No, that's okay, I just have one, if I could.
Go right ahead, Jason.
Add one comment, just dovetailing what Commissioner Mills just said. From an operational perspective, right now, both organizations are operating like small businesses, where there's one business owner who is everything from clerk to admin to CEO. And so, when I think about the work that I do and that EDAs do, and maybe Commissioner Mills, or not Mills, White and others don't know, I've done work for both at the same time, EDA and HRA. So I understand what that kind of feels like. There's a sort of dance you have to do. But I bring that up to say, one of the things that I think would be advantageous, selfishly, in the role of director, is to be able to specialize a little more. Right now, there's no ability to delegate things to someone who can get really good at certain systems, for example. So let's say there's a program like making sub Salesforce or Smart Sheets. There's a whole bunch of things. Or some grant application for Archival or Deed. Right now, it requires two people to know how to do all of those things well, or as good as we can get. And I can do them right now, but you can't do everything well or excellently. There's always a trade-off. So one of the appealing things to me is to be able to focus specialization. I mean, we still have to do a lot. Everybody wears a lot of hats, and two people is only two people. So it's, there's still going to have to be some generalist application here. But the idea of having someone who can work with a director who can take some area and kind of master that area of the organization, so the director can master another area. There's some appeal and efficiency, I think, to be achieved there.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments?
Have you talked about the levy limits of each of the entities?
We have not.
They're much higher than the levies that we are currently accessing, correct? We could,
If you got, would you be limited?
right,
That
we
way.
are limited.
Each one.
There are.
they're similar. I haven't studied it, but I know that each one in the statutes has a similar levy limit. It starts with .018 of the market value. So, and EDA has been close to that limit in the 300,000s. And so each one of them is going to have a similar limit. I think the goal is that projects are going to pay for a lot of costs and may not need that. But just, I think I would want to think about that and look at it closer.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Are you saying combined it would limit us more?
I don't know that you could have one organization and combine. I don't really know.
Oh.
It's two different, they're all part of the same statutes in that.
That's really.
But there is one that speaks to HRA and one that speaks to E.
It would be an important thing
That,
to nail
we need to
down.
take.
That seems like it might be a good, a question for legal counsel, Jason?
Brady and I were talking about this yesterday, and I had asked our attorney what the advantages and disadvantages to an HRA specific levy. It's a little confusing because, as we were talking about yesterday, there's something in statute that allows the HRA to establish an HRA levy, for example. Like it's its own line item, it's its own levy, and there's a statutory limit to what percentage of the total net tax capacity that levy can be applied to. However, right now, we don't have that in place. The HRA goes to the county board and requests part of the county levy to be dedicated for operations. So the question is just to confirm with attorneys that those are two distinct things that can continue. And the other question is, if they were to merge and we wanted to do a levy specific to that entity, are you limited to one or could you do both? So that's something I'm waiting to hear back from the attorney on. But either way, the current way we do it, my understanding is there's not a specific vote approved for a EDA levy that is sort of a line item in perpetuity. It's an annual visit to the county.
Commissioner White.
Could you explain to the legal public, your attorney? That's another question. What do you mean you're your own attorney? What's wrong with What's wrong with Ms. Molly? So.
Well, Commissioner, I don't have my own attorney. Sorry, that's just a habit that I have.
Talk to the.
General public, yes. The
Because
HR.
I've asked you already.
Yeah, thank you for, that's a good point of clarification. The HRA, as it presently is its own legal entity that is separate from the county. We have jurisdiction county-wide, but we do not have, for example, I can't call the county attorney and ask, Attorney Hickens to do work for the HRA, or I can't call IT and ask them to fix my computer or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we have specific areas in which we are, that we have, for example, we use county accounting, but we compensate them for that service. So when I say my attorney, I mean the HRA has contracted with an attorney. We have a consultant agreement with an attorney that's on retainer for whatever, and we have a budget that's approved for that service. Same thing with professional consultation and et cetera. Good question.
The listening public wants to know, needs to know, because they're footing the bill.
Yeah, and they can come, it's all very open book. They can come to any HRA board meeting. It's all been recorded, approved. We have minutes available. It's a lot of really riveting stuff if they want to dig into it, but.
I think that point is well made. I've been thinking that we should refer to it as the HRA attorney.
I will
going forward.
endeavor to do so. Coming from the city, I had an attorney that was assigned, like my attorney, that
To
so I'm so
your
used to saying,
office.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go back, Commissioner White, to something that you said earlier, that back when we separated the two organizations, and then we were kidding, and now we are going to do it different. We weren't kidding. We made the best decision with the information that was available to us at the time and the community input that we were hearing, what the community was saying to us. As Commissioner Mills said earlier, a lot of things have changed in the last 2 years. It gave us this opportunity to just take a look at things And I won't say that the only reason that we're looking at this, but one reason that we can look at this is because the county, the HRA, were fortunate enough to find a hire that has proven himself to do good work, to hit the ground running. You know, we don't have any shovels in the ground yet, so we're trying not to blow our horn too loud yet.
It's too cold, Chair.
Thank you. The ground is still
Thank you.
frozen.
But he comes with background in both working in the city of Duluth for the Housing Authority and the Economic Development Authority. So, you know, in the short term, that's a huge benefit. For me, in the long term, I think the benefit is, as President Serba said earlier, housing is our #1 economic development priority. So, it just is, as Commissioner Mills said, you know, we can have two silos, or we can have some weaving things together and see if that isn't a better way forward.
Well, the restructuring, I ask these questions because they are out there in the community.
Yep, and we want.
And that's why they need to hear from those that are right there, you two,
Yep.
to explain the thinking behind it.
Are there other places we should go and
I
speak?
have no idea.
Well, if you know anyone, whoever is listening, if you want us to come, we'll come. You know, we want the community to be able to ask their questions. We're grateful for the opportunity to.
Yeah.
Can I have one more, just one more?
Absolutely.
I'll keep it brief.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair. To your point, to what, there's lots of chairs here, so the chair, president. My chair, not my attorney, my chair, Mary Simon, says what she was saying. I have been adamant throughout this process about looking at this through the long-term lens and not about us. You should not, good practice is to not create a job for a specific person, because I could get hit by a bus, I could get an offer I can't refuse, you know, whatever.
No.
I know, I'm kidding. But
Not kidding.
well, there is a point.
Be real.
Yeah, but in all earnestness, I think it's important to think about what are the advantages of this long term. And I've been very clear that in the short term, there's going to be a lot of work, and I know who's going to do most of it if this happens. So I have no illusions about that. I think there is an advantage simply by virtue of having worked in both spaces before, that it would be helpful to have somebody, at least initially, to help set up systems and processes and get the organization sort of launched as a merged organization. I think there's an advantage to that. After that, however, if you have the right systems and processes in place and policies and all the wonderful things that you have to do, and both organizations already have those in place, so I'm not trying to demean the work that they've already done, but there's a little bit of a pivot that has to happen when you merge. I think that once that's done, you can get somebody who's got maybe either experience in, and they can continue that ship. So I've had to look at this, remove myself as much as possible to, with good conscience, be able to recommend one way or the other. And when I've been asked, I've said on balance, I think it makes sense, because after that initial speed bump of work, I think that there is good sense in it, and I think you do have some flexibility and nimbleness you don't otherwise have. And I would rather be able to look at development countywide than have to try to be really delicate with my counterpart, whose office is with me and who works in a lot of the same spaces and talk to the same funders and all those things. There's an ability to not have to worry about that and to look more strategically. So I'll keep it at that, but I think it is important long-term that decision, that's the fundamental basis for the decision.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Commissioner
Of
Miller.
course, I've got another. I just think because we're having this conversation, it's important to talk about this so it's as genuine as we can be. Regardless of this merger or not, there is a need for staffing for both the HRA and the EDA. At this time, both positions, both executive director positions, like you said, do everything, the clerk, every aspect of it. And that is not an efficient use of a director's time. And so if we decide to merge, having those two professionals are there still is going to require somebody that's doing not the higher level stuff. So I want everyone to be aware of what I think needs to happen there. And I think the EDA board believes that, and I'm pretty sure the HRA board, I just don't know, I guess. And so that's gonna be coming along in this kind of transition development. We don't have the budget for it this year.
Numbers don't add up.
Yeah, we don't have the budget, we don't have the budget for it this year, but that is something that's a real need, and regardless of merger or not, is gonna be coming forward. And I've been hearing feedback from a number of professionals in the community that the director level positions are not being adequately funded or paid. And so I just want people to be aware of that too. And I know it's awkward for Jason to be sitting here when I say this, but that's it's a big deal. If we want this to be successful, if we want both or combined to be successful, we need to be able to support that and invest in it. And that's dollars, and that's taxpayer dollars, and that's a conversation for down the road. But I want that to be out there, so it's not like when we were talking about the merger, I didn't hear anything about that, because I do think that's going to be a huge conversation in not too long here. So that's a nice thing to, yeah.
Like in June or July when we work on the 2024
Right,
budgets.
yeah,
we're-
which is
Yeah.
like tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely. James?
Madam Chair, just a question. So obviously this need is now. In order for this machine to get into the air, both county board and city council have to vote in support of the proposal. And I'm just wondering what the expectations are around the table when that's going to happen. I mean, county board's next business meeting is Tuesday next week. Is it something that you all want to see on the agenda then? Is it something that requires, and we raised an important question about levy limits in terms of funding this combined organization. There may be other big questions that need to be answered. I'm just wondering what folks are thinking about the timing of all of this.
I would really like to get the budget information. I think that would be very, very important on the levy. Clarify.
Whether the blended organization can levy both the EDA and the
Correct.
HRA limit.
I'll get that later today.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we need to know that
As soon as
before
we have that information, I think we can,
Well, if we can get it readily, I would like to put it on the agenda. We don't have to decide Tuesday that I want it. I want it on the agenda so we can talk about it and take action if we're ready, but we don't.
if we
need
have
to.
that
Well, it's only
information.
if we have the information.
Right, yeah.
Maybe next week is too short.
What day is
Jason's
It's-
saying he might be
I
able
could
to
probably
get
get
that
it by the end of
information
the day.
today.
Oh,
Just to be
This
clear,
is
if the
Tuesday,
information's
right?
about the levy limits.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
Well, I think it could be
Commissioner.
on the agenda, but to say we can make a decision is a little premature. I mean, things don't need to be rushed. Jason's here, he's our guy, the HRA, he knows what he's doing, and combining, but it needs,
We need to know.
we need to know the numbers, we need to have the time to think about the numbers, we need to have
And to
time to
discuss
get
among
input.
ourselves.
Yes.
Well, and I think the public too, maybe I'll have you come to the West End. I don't know how many people really understand what's going on. When we start looking at the 2024 budget, that's when it's going to hit the fan. So that's why we need to know some more
Well-
background.
Only, Commissioner Storley, only if we decide to add a third person.
Yes.
And I don't know that we're going to decide to add a third person in 2024. That'll be up to the merged board or the separate boards to decide. If we, in my brain, if this merger happens, what is this, March, April, May, time is going by. Pretty soon we're preparing an agenda,
A budget.
budget for 2024. I don't know that we're going to be ready to decide that we need a third person in 2024. I don't,
That goes back to because I'm a numbers person, and what, in your memo, the uses of funds for '23, the sources of funds, you include the HRA budget and levy plus the rollover from '22. But you do not include any rollover from the EDA budget for '22. I want to know, is there?
Yeah.
What is that rollover amount? What could be used to offset what we have to take off the 100,000 that you count for twice? You have to take off the 60,000 that you put in there that you really aren't getting. So let's go back and make sure those numbers are right, and what does the EDA come to the table with?
Could I offer something I think to clarify quickly? I don't want to conflate. I think we're maybe confusing for the public. Right now, the budgets are approved for 2023 for both organizations. So if they continue to operate the way they are, nothing changes. Merging or not, what we're saying is what I believe that's Steve 3. If either separately or a merged entity came to the county board and said we think we need more staff, and I'll corroborate Mary's perspective. I think frankly it would be too soon to do that in July. It might be good to hedge a little bit and try to get maybe something set aside. Maybe there's rollover, whatever. We can think about that. Think about hiring another person and then getting them onboarded and then hiring a third person. That would be pretty quick. And it would take, there's so much work to be done in the interim that I don't think I'd even be ready to tell that other person or help train them in. But that's just my subjective moment in this time. Having said that, I think I want to be clear, the budget doesn't change. The budget's set. If the budget ever was to increase, regardless of that mechanism, whether it's for one or two entities, they have to come to the county board and request that budget increase. So just so the public knows, nothing would change about the tax implications at all until such time as a request would be made and then maybe approved, maybe not.
I get that, but the 60,000 wasn't included in.
Yep.
factored
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the EDA budget. So
We got it.
that right there, when you give this information of what is available for projects, really, it's not.
Right.
And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page of expectations on numbers.
So, yeah, very, very important clarification. We don't want to go forward with the wrong numbers. None of us want to go forward with the wrong numbers. And I am pretty embarrassed right here, right now, on this camera in front of the community to say that we brought the wrong numbers. So we're going to fix them, and we're going to send this again. And hopefully we can meet for a few minutes with you, Brady, after this meeting so that you can give us clearly and exactly what was approved for 2023, because I don't feel that we got this right. So if you have a minute.
I really appreciate that last comment, because I absolutely want clarity and really appreciate all of that and look forward to clarity there. Though in my mind, it's not a factor in whether or not they should be combined. It's needed regardless if they're combined or not, but the factors in my mind is what is going to serve our community best, and how do we best do that. And so because the budgets are set and not changing, how the numbers are, how clear the numbers aren't a factor in that decision, but it is something that also needs to happen. So I appreciate that comment, because it does separate things from me, though I still want the levy limit numbers, because those do affect our decision there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's, it just, my mind was going in multiple directions the wrong way, and thank you for sharing that.
I think it's good that we had the opportunity to clarify that.
Well, we'll put this item on the agenda, hopefully have some numbers regarding the levy, cleaned up budget sheet, and we'll continue our discussion and see where that goes.
Madam Chair, could I ask another question? Do we know how soon the city plans to put this on the council's agenda?
No.
If I were, you want me to guess? After the county makes a decision.
That's what we kind of have mapped out in our path. No, but we can change it if that's what people want. We're not.
Thank you for the chance to well, thank you for them, I don't know. I'm just- yeah,
thanks for your time today.
Great, it was a great discussion, thank you
you're
very
welcome.
much.
Great question.
Thanks for
Good
joining
questions.
me.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Brady.
thank you.
Let's take a 3-minute break and let Mr. Thompson come up and get organized.
Sausage.
So can we go to your?
Yeah.
I cannot, I've missed one meeting and I'm already late for another one. so-
All right, I'll do it.
Okay.
I got it. Okay.
That was a very good discussion.
Yeah, excellent.
Good. I passed it, now I have. I wish I had that Milky Way candy bar that I don't know, what did I have? Three Musketeer candy bar. I ate mine.
Did a trip
I ate
over
it
that.
already. Last time I got too hungry. I'll be fine.
Piece of jerky.
Yeah?
I don't know.
Now we'll get our snacks.
For you, it's kind of like that, but it's. I know, it's just taking, yeah. Yeah. Shuffling and. Like one step forward, 5 more tasks back. Well, April 10th, I will wish you here, for your sake. Yeah. You do the same.
It's not a completed.
Okay? Thank you.
You didn't give us anything in your packet, so I-
There wasn't anything attached, I just printed out some.
So what is our net tax capacity right now?
Our total market value, I think for '22, it was 2.2 billion. It was up like 30%. I don't know what the final is this year. We'll know that Friday.
I'm excited to see how this is morphed and changed.
Yeah, so this, and I guess we'll wait, but it's not the final version. It's kind of just a framework, and I used your statement of policy. I liked the way that kind of explains the reason why we're drafting a policy.
So why will we know on Friday what happens?
We still are running our ratio reports, so we're still finalizing the assessment.
Oh, I thought. When were you on the radio about how much part of it?
It's still owed on the,
It's sending out,
business
things are at the printer, so I thought.
The
numbers were-
tax
have that in
statements
my
are
head,
at the
but-
printer. That's
you know,
from
how
last
many
year's
lots are
values.
sold, 'cause they-
Yeah, and the
And
EDA.
then the current year values will be
Well,
at the
city
printer on
has.
Friday. We have to get it to them
We need to
by
get that bonded.
but we're in the process of just reviewing stuff,
Brady questions.
making sure that all the numbers are good and we're not gonna have any surprises.
Yeah, what happened last year? We missed.
Didn't miss anything. And we had the state assessed a few years ago that was entered in incorrectly, and we had to adjust that, but that was not, that wasn't around the time of setting, finalizing values. We get those values, actually, the state assessed values won't be set until probably November or December for '23.
Bob, do you have a PowerPoint? that you
There,
wanna
no,
add?
no, there's
I
no
just wanted to double
PowerPoint.
check.
And I'll wait for Administrator Yorkie to kind of get into it, but.
Yeah.
Using that 2.2 billion, it would.
It's like 400,000.
Oh, for the EDA.
Mhm.
No, yeah, as the Historical Society,
Oh,
we can do 2.418%, so that's only 53 million.
wow.
Isn't that interesting? We could do that for the Historical Society, but 400,000 is the max for the EDA.
Yeah, I was kind of reading that statute, and it says something about the Redevelopment Authority, so I don't know, if they're two different entities, are they treated differently than if they're one entity? I mean,
I think, no, but I don't know.
yeah.
That's my knee
That's an
jerk.
attorney question.
Yeah, yeah. That's just from past conversations and my knee jerk. I don't remember. I haven't that exclusive, I don't remember. That was I feel like that was part of the HRA formation discussion, but we didn't get down that road too far. It's a huge factor though.
See, if we could go to the library and use the microfiche machine.
See?
it
We
would
would
be-
know.
We would know. And the paper. This is
I'm
my
having a
goal.
meeting today, actually, so,
Good.
or, not a board meeting, but,
We have a microfiche reader at the library that nobody uses because when you go there to read a newspaper, which goes back to 1905, you have to take a picture of it on your phone
it's not hooked up to a printer.
and not hooked up to a printer. So we have valuable information sitting there that's not being used. So I have talked to the director that possibly to look into a machine that would print out what you want, and it would be used by many, many more people by all kinds of different topics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is quite a dream, and I don't know if it's at all, like what the cost would be there, but we could digitize all that microfilm and then you could search it rather than
Yeah.
scrolling through
Scrolling
it.
through
But that's
it,
part of the joy of it too, scrolling through it, it's kind of neat.
Used one is about $2,500 and a new one is over $3,000.
I guess we don't have to wait for Administrator Yorkie. I kind of wanted him to be here for, this isn't a final draft of the policy, obviously. Once you guys get into it and look at it, it's not official, it's not all the way through and finished. I kind of am here for input, feedback, and any contributions, suggestions the commissioners might have.
So we have to write draft on this whole thing, right?
It is draft, yeah. Yeah, and, obviously, it's an extremely busy time of the year for me. We didn't get the final sales ratio numbers from revenue until January 20th. So we appealed our time trend that they gave us. We submitted our appeal December 12th, and it took until January 20th to get the official response on that appeal. So the difference is off-water properties, we're gonna have a 27% time trend, and that went down to 0 when we appealed it. So it's a difference of, do I have to go up over 27% to get to the ratios that we need, or am I going up 6-7% to get to the ratios? We had to wait until we had that finalized number, and it's been just crunch time ever since the end of January. So we already had this on an agenda at an earlier meeting for the committee of the whole, and pushed it back to this meeting. I've still been finalizing the assessment. In fact, the assessment will be sent off to the printer on Thursday officially. If not Thursday, Friday morning, but it will be there by the end of the week. We're just double checking numbers on that, and with all of the work in the assessment, I've not had a whole lot of time to commit to this policy and the land commissioner. There's also a development that I'm sure most of you guys are aware of, and that's something I wanted to start off by talking about, and then we can kind of segue into our policy. But there is a case at the Supreme Court. Geraldine Tyler is a property owner who had a condominium in Minneapolis go tax forfeit back in 2012. The tax bills, penalties, all the interest totaled up to nearly $15,000. And a couple years after the forfeiture, the county sold the property for $45,000. So, now all these years later, I think some attorneys were kind of looking around for a case, because this has happened in Michigan, it's happened in other states, where they're saying that the taxpayer is due the excess funds. If the county has collected all of those penalties and interest, that the proceeds from a tax forfeit sale should go back to the previous owner. That really complicates things as far as, Cook County has a lot of tax forfeit lands that, we haven't had a sale in a while, in a number of years. We've have tax forfeit properties that some of them are probably from the early 1900s. In fact, I think around the 1920s, there was almost 3 million acres of land given to the northern counties, and those northern counties, for the most part, manage it for timber harvest. Cook County, we don't actively manage any timber harvest. We haven't done any planting, and as far as I know, we have nominal timber stands at best on some of our parcels. But this Supreme Court case could have some significant impacts on if we are disposing of land, selling tax forfeit properties. We almost kind of want to wait and see what's going to come of this Supreme Court case. Now, I know that it's gotten to the level where now it's becoming a class action lawsuit. The Department of Justice has signed on an amicus brief with Geraldine Tyler, as well as a lot of the congressional representatives down in Washington, D.C. from Minnesota. So Stauber, Emmer, a number of other representatives have signed on in support of the Geraldine Tyler position. Now, on the other hand, we have AMC and a whole number of organizations, including a number of states throughout the United States, that are signing on to an amicus brief in support of Hennepin County. In the eyes of our association of assessors and the land commissioners, this could completely undermine the whole property tax system. If somebody says, I'm not going to pay my taxes because the county's just going to sell my property for me, and if you look at it, it takes a number of years for this process to happen. You accrue the taxes that would have been originally paid, and a percentage of interest and fees, but it likely isn't going to exceed what you would spend on a real estate agent to sell a property, unless there's a modification or a revision to the fees and things that are attached to that forfeiture. The county would stand to lose money every single time there's a forfeiture. Another problem we see is, I get a lot of the times when somebody's appealing their property valuation, they'll say, well, I'm willing to sell it to the county for, 1.2 million. The county can buy it from me for that. And it could create some interesting conversations where, somebody feels that they're overvalued, and they know that if the county is to forfeit this, they get to keep the proceeds. Well, that's going to become a point of argument where if somebody feels they're overvalued, they're going to say, go ahead and sell it, I'll take it, and that creates a big problem for the Association of Assessors, as well as just undermining the property tax system and not having this, this penalty of forfeiture. We are sensitive to, Geraldine Tyler's position, and it appearing that, the county has walked away with $25,000 that she may be entitled to, but the facts of the case kind of show that there really maybe wasn't equity at the time when she decided to walk away from the property, that values were actually at a really low, and a couple years later they were starting to recover. So the timing of everything, it makes it look like, the county took some equity that maybe didn't even exist. And at the time when Ms. Tyler walked away from the property, I think that was something she was aware of, that there really wasn't equity based on the market and the economy. But, in addition to that, there are a number of off-ramps for homeowners, homesteaders. If they're delinquent on taxes, there's a number of programs where they can come current. They can do a payment plan with the auditor's office. And all the way up until the day of the county's tax forfeit auction, they can redeem that property all the way up to the auction. So there's a number of off-ramps, like I say, where if you feel like you've got $40,000 property and you owe $15,000 in taxes, you could, in theory, sell that property, pay the tax obligation, and walk away with your proceeds. So I think that the way the statutes are written, it's very much offering that ability to take those off-ramps, and if you have equity, to walk away with it before it ultimately just becomes property of the county. So we're gonna have to keep a close eye on that. Like I said, I'm part of the Association of Land Commissioners and the Association of Assessors. They have voted already to sign on to an amicus brief with AMC. That's being drafted up, and I think they're due by like April 5th. So if you haven't heard about this topic, I'm sure you will, because there's a lot of organizations in Minnesota, local governments, that see it as a pretty big threat.
Bob, I was just going to interject. I was on a call of the Minnesota Association of County Administrators on Friday, and Ramsey County has a really great website that is a resource for people whose property may be at risk of forfeiture, providing different options, agencies they can reach out to and steps they can take to prevent that from occurring. So you're right, there are a lot of opportunities for people who are in that position to avoid the outcome of having their property forfeited.
Yeah, yep. And we see it's extremely important. I mean, the county's not interested in taking someone's property and cashing out on it. It's the process that's been in place for however many years, that if you aren't going to pay your property tax bill, the county has a way of recouping that. And I guess this is probably not the first time that this equity and excess taking and all this conversation about where the equity should go. I'm sure it's not the first time it's come up, but now it's gotten to the highest level. Hennepin County has been favored by the courts all the way up through the district court, the Court of Appeals, and now it's up to the Supreme Court to make a decision. But as Matt Hilgert with AMC said, the Supreme Court typically doesn't take up cases that they're just affirming the law. They obviously saw this as something that should be looked at, and maybe there's going to be a change. But if that happens, the tax forfeiture manual and the assessor's manual, there's going to have to be a lot of statutes rewritten. Section 282 is the tax forfeiture statute section in Minnesota, and the whole thing would have to be revamped. I mean, everything is based around this ability for the county to take these properties when they're forfeited. So nonetheless, we are developing a plan to dispose of or to disperse our tax forfeit properties. There's properties that are underutilized at the moment. They could either serve a public benefit, maybe a public space, or something like the Housing Redevelopment Authority put it to use. So all these different, we met last year and talked about some of the priorities that the board saw, important issues that if we have a property that fits this need or fits this use, we want to try and map a plan for those parcels to get utilized. So Board Chair Sullivan did start working on, a statement of a policy and kind of just highlighting some of the priorities of Cook County and some of the things that we see as important to it. So I did kind of create some of the whereases and the therefores, because this will ultimately come over as a resolution. So I drafted a couple of those up, and they may need some tweaking. We may need to add some or kind of change the way they're written up. And then it goes into what would be the policy, starting with the statement of policy. And essentially, like I said, it's outlining what our priorities are and what we're seeing as beneficial uses to utilize these lands and to maximize the productivity and efficiency of our lands. The way I see this starting out is each parcel I'll be putting together these comprehensive parcel reports. So, it's going to include all of the necessary information for the board to learn about this property. Where is it? What is it? What is it zoned? What are the surrounding properties being used for? How much land is there? are there covenants and restrictions? Sometimes you're, you know, in a homeowners association where there are covenants and restrictions on the deeds. Also providing some examples of similar sales, so you kind of get an idea of what is this property worth. And kind of just a general overview or description of the parcel. Now, in addition to all that real factual data, there's another analysis that needs to be done in, you know, going through the various departments, the HRA and the EDA, each one of them kind of looking at it from their perspective and saying, you know, is there a use that we see beneficial to this parcel? Is there something we could do to utilize it and streamline government efficiencies? So, and in addition to that, there's going to be additional review for things like, you know, let's say you have a 40-acre parcel and in the zoning you have a 5-acre minimum. Maybe the county is best suited to subdivide that parcel out. The statute allows the board by resolution to subdivide lands and maximize or to increase the sale potential if that's what they see fit. So there'll be a comprehensive checklist where, you know, each department is going through and looking at it from their perspective. They're either saying, yes, we have a purpose for this lot, or no, we don't. When we come to the conclusion that, you know, let's say there's a lot that no other department or organization sees a good use for, and we think that it's best suited to just put back into the tax rolls to sell it at auction, eventually it would get there and they would all go through this checklist. But the first step is gathering all the data and bringing that to the county board. The county board by statute is supposed to classify these lands. So there's conservation and non-conservation. Those are the two classifications. I believe all of our tax forfeit parcels have been classified as non-conservation, but I could not find any agenda item or resolution that verifies this. This was just in some of the notes that I have inherited. So it may be in our interest to just go through and do some classifications, because the county can at any point in time reclassify these properties if they have classified it previously and want to review that. There are some requirements for public notice. It can be done during a regular board meeting, but it does require a public notice, electronic. Also, if there's anybody who's asked to be notified of special meetings, and also putting it out in the newspaper so that people are aware that the county is looking at the classification of these parcels.
Did you look in the board minutes?
I have searched. I don't know how far back those go.
Because Lisa brought it to the county board. I was sitting over there taking minutes.
Mhm.
I remember that
Yeah.
coming.
And I couldn't find the resolution in all of our folders for the land commissioner. So it's probably something that exists, but like I said, if we determine that any of these should be classified conservation, we can certainly review that and do that.
Would
Or
that
the board.
I'm sorry. Would that predate iCompass? I mean, would that?
Well, I'm wondering if it was right around the same time. Yeah, because it could have been before I compassed.
It would have. It would have been like 2017, 18, because
Okay,
those were
yeah.
the 2 years she was in the role.
Okay, so it could have been my first year. I just remember seeing the list and her come in and they were classified. That's when I first learned, what is this?
Yeah, and so there was a presentation given to the board by our former land commissioner where that's the only place that I've found where it says Cook County has already classified these parcels as non-conservation. So that was all I had to go off of. I did search in the Civic Web, the search option, and I didn't see anything. I couldn't find a resolution, and I don't know if maybe there was a resolution. I would imagine this should be listing each parcel. Yeah, I would imagine you'd have to list each parcel and, you know, say that, you know, this list of parcels is non-conservation, or go through them one by one, but that's.
Sorry, I didn't mean to divert, but
No.
it was like, you did that.
I'd be curious if there was a resolution, because then, you know, then we can still decide if we want to review or reanalyze these. Once we have all this parcel information gathered, all these different entities looking at the parcel and saying whether or not they have a use for it, then we can really classify it, rather than, you know, coming to the board and having a recommendation that we just say all of this is non-conservation land. So the classification is pretty clearly outlined in state statute. It's the 28201. They actually outline some of the criteria that must be used in deciding the classification of the parcel, which is kind of in line with our policy statement and some of the priorities that we had already talked about, maximizing government efficiency, those types of things. So the next page over, there's third page here. So it's supposed to achieve those following goals. Now that is actually listed out in the red book, and they're citing that statute 28201. So, encouraging economical and efficient use of the property, reduce local and state government expenses, conserve and develop the state's natural resources, and encourage economic development. So those are all very much in line with the priorities that the board had kind of expressed at our earlier meetings. So I did, I haven't really made it much further past this section of the Red Book, where I'm actually going through the Red Book and learning a lot myself. Obviously this land commissioner role is something new. I've always been a property valuation guy, but it's definitely a good experience to go through and kind of learn about how the tax forfeit process it goes. So after the board classifies, if say the board decides, okay, this is a non-conservation parcel and it's going to go to tax forfeit sale auction. In Cook County, just about every single time we're going to need DNR approval. And that's because we have a state park in the boundaries of Cook County. So the initial checklist, and they have their own flow chart where you start off and it asks, is the property located in a county where a state park exists? And then it goes, DNR approval needed. And then if the DNR approves it, my guess is that if it's adjacent to the state park, they're going to absorb that land into the public land, into the state park. I'm assuming that if it's outside of the state park boundaries and if it's not adjacent to the state park, then it goes back into their flow chart. And for a number of different reasons, it can end up back at the DNR must approve this use or this sale. So if it's a lakeshore property, every time a lakeshore property needs to be approved. And if it's over 150 feet of shoreline, it actually has to be a special piece of legislation for the county to sell that. So it's not uncommon. St. Louis County, I believe in the lands bill this year, had several parcels that were lakefront parcels that they're asking to sell. And it just goes in as a line item, and they're saying, St. Louis County can sell this property located, gives all the legal description and everything. So not uncommon. We do have, we have a rather large lakeshore parcel up on Loon Lake. I think there was close to 1,000 feet of shoreline, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it in a long time. But, something like that, as we're going through this parcel identification and parcel report process, you might look at it and say, well, if we put a $100,000 road in and subdivide that into 10 lots, it's going to bring back a much bigger return. No, obviously that's assuming that it isn't going to be put to another use like a public landing or something like that. But all of that will be done in this analysis, and also looking at, is there something that the county may have to incur an expense in order to determine, is this the best use? And that would be something like a bore sample for soil, aggregate, gravel pits, things like that, surface gravel. That might require some expense to be incurred by the county. So another example of that was a subdivision. If you were subdividing and needed to have it platted out or surveyed, that could be an additional expense. And there were some other ones like timber. If you want to have like what they call a timber cruise done, where they go and inventory your standing timber, that has a cost at a certain amount per acre and things like that. But we'll cross that bridge with each parcel individually, and then all of that information will be in a compiled report and brought to the board at the time of classification. So I know we had kind of just talked about some of the county board's priorities, and that was, the tribal interests that parcels may have. Obviously affordable housing is right up there at the top of our list. And then just kind of general county operations, if there's a piece of land that the highway department had a need for, that they would be considered. and then, public spaces, parks, things like that. Kind of just going down that list of priorities, and again, this is where I'm kind of asking the board. We started developing a flow chart, and I think that flow chart completely hinges on what the main priorities are. Another piece of this that I'm really searching for help on is the tribal interest. I'm not sure how vague or how specific we want to get in a policy, and creating policy and saying, the tribe would receive a parcel if this was the circumstance, or if that was the circumstance. That's, for me, it's a very difficult piece of this.
And that is a very challenging piece. As we started to talk about this a few months ago, I was researching Minnesota statute regarding lands that could revert back to a tribe. And have had some discussions with AMC about that. And so it's something we have to look at very cautiously and really think long and hard about. But we have had preliminary conversations with Chairman DeShaw, with AMC, to see how this kind of lays out. And then the piece about housing. If we have tax forfeited parcels and they lend themselves to housing, what is the mechanism with which this board can give that housing, transfer that housing to our HRA? So that's a real strong emphasis with looking at this policy. Commissioner Stoll.
So Bob, how many properties do we have in the tax forfeited bracket?
We have about 3,000 acres. Now, the parcel count, I'm not exactly sure, and I do know that if you start kind of whittling out different categories, so like the courthouse parking lot over across the street is technically a tax forfeit parcel. The half of that parking lot is. Where the highway departments, where I think the fuel tanks, that whole area over there is split off in a number of different parcels, but like a couple of them, or one or two of them, are tax forfeit, and the other ones are owned in county fee. So at some point the county went to the state and said, hey, we're using this for a public purpose, and the state transferred it into fee interest. So if you start eliminating some of the parcels that have already been utilized tax forfeit, it kind of really narrows down. I would say there's maybe 30 or 40 that will have to actually go through this whole process of and look at how do we utilize this parcel where it's not being utilized. I think there's somewhere in the ballpark of 40 that are not being utilized. And then, you'll have some situations where, like the Maple Hill Fire Hall, I believe, is on a 40-acre parcel that's tax forfeited. And, I think that's very easy to, we could go to the DNR and say, there's a fire hall here, this is gonna be the use of this property, and get it into county fee ownership where it's not held in trust. But, there's another 35 acres there that maybe there's another use, maybe we could subdivide, maybe we could find another reason. And I know up at the Mid Trail Community Center, again, that's a tax forfeit parcel that we received as part of the land exchange. There's the community center, a fire hall, and now we have a request from one of the ski trail organizations to build a shop to house their groomer in. And so, these things come up a lot, but that's another, parcel of tax forfeit lands where it's a rather large parcel, and the envelope that's being utilized for those buildings is quite small. So maybe there's some potential there for subdividing and either selling or looking at other potential uses.
And you as commissioners may get phone calls like I got, where I had a community member call me and is very interested in purchasing one of these parcels. I don't know if you've had those calls or not. But the fact that we need to get a policy and a process and procedure going, and then at some point identify parcels and have an auction. It's been a long time since we've done that. And so it is to our advantage to do this.
Yeah, and so just to kind of touch on that, I have been getting more calls, I would say, in the last year and a half, 2 years. Ever since the real estate market went crazy and took off, there's a lot less available land. In fact, if you look from town going all the way west, there is not a parcel for sale outside of a homeowners association. And You know, a lot of times people want to be outside of an HOA. They want their 5 acres in the woods where nobody's telling them what to do. And I think actually even all the parcels in the homeowners associations now are under contract. I don't think there's any vacant land available west of town other than like an 80 acre for $350,000. So definitely not like your entry level where somebody can just go and buy a piece of land and build on it. So we've been getting more of those calls, and I have always told, you know, these taxpayers, I said, this is a conversation that has been ongoing. We know that we need to start utilizing these properties, and some of them, and particularly I did kind of put together a little bit of a parcel report and checklist on this. This parcel has been talked about so many times. It's a Tofty parcel in a subdivision, in a homeowners association. There are covenants and restrictions. There are actually HOA dues that I've spoke to the president of the homeowners association, and they said, you know, these dues are still accruing for each month that this parcel is sitting vacant. They haven't asked the county for payment. I believe that they're anticipating that the buyer of that property would have to make that current. So this is one that I've received a number of calls on, and I have had the conversation with these taxpayers and said, you know, we're aware, we want to utilize them, we're working on it. It's been years since we've had a tax forfeit auction, and I've always just told them, I said, if you're having a conversation with your commissioner in your district, let them know that you have interest in these parcels, because the more they're hearing about the interest, the more they understand that there is interest out there, and that we can now prioritize and say, let's sell this parcel. I mean, this is one we've received probably 4 or 5 calls on in the last 2 years. And now I did just get a call last week for one up the Gunflint Trail, and there's been one east of town where some of the adjacent property owners have called on quite a bit. So we definitely are getting to a point where we need to start moving and start doing some things with these parcels. Now, we talked about expediting parcels that are kind of in this situation where you can really quickly eliminate that it's not going to be used for a tower. The highway department isn't going to build a building there. It's not going to be like a satellite for the sheriff's office. So it's something like this is quite clear that we can, with a little bit of due diligence, review and say that this property should be put back into the tax rolls. We should expedite the process and try have an auction even this spring or summer. I've kind of been eyeing maybe June or after June, since our Board of Appeals is in June, trying to do an auction. And, you know, we may be 5 parcels, we may be 10 parcels, but I would really like to keep moving in that direction. And I can put together the list of these, you know, the ones that I think I look at a high level and say, you know, it's surrounded by residential, it's not going to be used for a public use, it's not going to be used for a government operation. I'll still run it by Jason Hale and say, you know, is this something you see as a parcel that maybe you could utilize in a way that would be an advantage to the HRA? And then we'll come to the board and get that classification and approval to put it into the sale. Brady has typically moderated these sales. They, I believe, are normally an auction, a counter auction, open bid process for a certain length of time. We have to public notice and make it available. Obviously, we're going to do our best to get the message out there that something's available so that we can get the highest bidder in. There are alternatives out there to doing just an in-house auction. There are public services like online websites. I know St. Louis County uses one where I sat in on a presentation. It's called Public Surplus, so that's an online auction site. They auction everything from fleet vehicles to land, and they're currently handling St. Louis counties. In fact, they did just contract with AMC. So
I think Highway just recently used that for a couple of vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they just kind of high level, they say that, you know, it's a buyer's premium fee, so the county isn't charged. Whatever the auction sale price is what the county receives. Any additional is added on to the buyer side of things, so they pay the auction site fee and the AMC's contract fee. So that's something that maybe we want to look into, and maybe we don't need to, maybe just in-house is sufficient. I do know that the county board has a number of ways that they can set the value of the property. So the Board of Commissioners can literally take whatever information is available, parcel report, assess value, and they can say, this is what we're appraising it as, this is what we want to sell it for. If the parcel does not sell, you know, say we list this for $60,000 because we think it would sell for that. If it doesn't sell, then it just becomes available at that price, and it stays at that price for 12 months, and then the county board can review that value or reduce it if they think it's necessary. So, you know, if you look at St. Louis County, they probably have 30 or 40 parcels that are just available. They're called over the counter. You can walk in there and say, I want to buy it for that amount. We don't have any, not at this time, but if we can put together a list, get some information out there and say, hey, we're going to be auctioning off these 5 or 10 parcels, it's going to really be a step in the right direction. It'll be a nice chance for me to experience that process and working with Brady, who's kind of always done it in the past. I do think some of the responsibilities that, you know, maybe Brady and his office have been doing in the past will kind of shift over to me, which is more or less how it was done way back, I guess, when Ted Mershon was both the county assessor and land commissioner. So I think when Ted left, the couple of assessors in between Ted and I didn't have any interest in doing the land commissioner role, and for a little while it was actually created into a position with Parks and Trails, but you know, now we're really kind of analyzing all of this stuff. Parks and Trails is getting a much closer look at it, and where do those roles fit with the new position that's going to be coming, and then how does the tax forfeit stuff fit into that. And then another thing, in addition to a disposition policy, one of the things that I really wanted to work on was creating like just a general land policy. So, you know, when, say, the highway department is utilizing this parcel for gravel, we need to kind of outline, you know, who's responsible when a concern comes up on this parcel. If say somebody went out there and built a tree stand out in the woods, who's going to go out there and put the notice on the building to say, hey, you got to remove this. This can't be on county property. There's a number of issues, and they haven't so much come up in Cook County, but in other counties, and I've kind of monitored them as they come up. You know, people cutting trees down they want a better sight path for their hunting shack on county land. People who have been camping on county land for more than 2 weeks. The state law allows you to camp on tax forfeit parcel for up to 2 weeks, but then you have to move and relocate. It's similar to like federal land. Unless there's an ordinance created against that, then you can say, well, you can't camp within the city limits overnight on tax forfeit land. So those are some of the things that just a general land policy would help sort out. I know there's been a number of times where somebody will contact, you know, Tim's office, say it's a parking issue at Clearwater Landing. And, you know, Tim will ultimately send it over to me, and then I'll kind of dig into it and talk to the county attorney's office. And, you know, we circled back, and actually this was someone from the DNR who ran into somebody out in the field, and they said, yeah, I got a warning on my car about parking at the landing overnight. And, well, the policy says if you are utilizing the landing for its purpose, you can park there. There's specifically a sign that says no camping at the landing. But what this individual is doing is parking at the landing, using it as a landing to access the lake, and they're going out and sleeping in an ice shanty on the lake. So that's not necessarily camping at the landing, but it is camping on the lake. I mean, so these are some of the things that we really need to look at, create policies. Potentially we need to create some ordinances like camping and building improvements on tax forfeit lands. I guess at this point right now, if we found out that somebody had made an encampment on our tax forfeit parcel, I don't know how we would approach that. I mean, other than having the sheriff go out there and tell them, like, you can't be here in 2 weeks. I mean, that's about the extent of, and I'm sure this thing would go from one office to the other a couple times before ultimately somebody would say, well, send the sheriff out there and tell them that they gotta be out in 2 weeks. So, I'll be working probably, into the beginning of the summer here on a land management policy that will kind of dovetail in with this land disposition policy. So if we're putting a property to specific use, we're also saying, and so-and-so manages the lease on this property, so-and-so is in charge of trespass complaints or things like that. So really kind of laying out some of the issues and topics that have come up over the last 2 years since I've been doing this, 2.5 years since I've been kind of the interim land commissioner or filling that role. It'd be really nice to have a policy that outlines these situations that occasionally come up. You know, when the border route trail wanted to add a campsite, since the county has those trail leases with the state of Minnesota and the Forest Service, we have to kind of facilitate that renegotiation of the lease. And you know, that was one where it was like Tim Nelson didn't feel like it was a Parks and Trails thing because he didn't have a copy of the lease. Well, I didn't have a copy of the lease. It wasn't on tax forfeit lands, and ultimately we found out that Brady had the lease. So, you know, this is the kind of thing where, you know, Tim looked into it, I looked into it, and then finally Brady, you know, spoke up and said, yeah, I've got that old lease. We'll have to, you know, get it renewed, and I'll put it on the board agenda. I think if we can kind of outline and specify some of the management aspects of our county lands, it would be real beneficial to us.
Well, I appreciate all the work you've done. I know that you know, there's a lot of information out there. I would encourage commissioners to go to the Minnesota Department of Revenue website, download for bedtime reading information on tax forfeited parcels, but there is extensive information that will help to provide you with background, and in the event you do have taxpayers calling you about parcels, you'll understand the process better and the work that we need to do here to kind of get up to speed with all the parcels that we have. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one thing I would just really much like to see added into our initiatives is land swaps, just straight up with the state, because there is significant state land around the city and close to town, and I'm sure throughout the county that would be better suited for housing than the county land. And seeing as that's a significant need, I'd like to make that more.
Yeah, we can definitely look at land exchanges, and they do happen. They take a long time. Government, even beyond the county, doesn't go so quickly.
Yeah.
But they do happen.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Mills. That actually is something, I think you brought that up before, and it is a really good point that, you know, maybe we have this property that is better suited as just like a wetlands preservation in the DNR's interest. And, you know, maybe the DNR has got something right there along the highway that we could swap for, and that might be much better suited for like a housing project that is so important to us. So certainly we can look into that land swap aspect. You know, like you say, it is a lengthier process, and, you know, I think that if you're making a proposal, say to the state or the feds, you really want to make it a sweet proposal. So you're going to be offering up something that maybe looks on the surface more valuable than what you're receiving, or, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's not so much that way, but
yeah, values. Yeah,
yep.
Different values.
And I think that the county can make a very good case on some of the state and federal lands that are much closer to the highway. Of, you know, we don't have a lot of land available, and, you know, I'm not sure how much the state ever has given to a county and said, okay, well, yeah, we'll give you this land to develop. But I think that's certainly something we want to pursue, and not even so much just swapping, but saying, can you release some land to us?
Well, because the state and the feds, they need housing, you know, and they're not doing it. We're the arm of the state, so It's in their best interest as well.
The state has been having a lot of troubles filling their positions for the state parks. In fact, they've posted the same ones multiple times and haven't been able to fill them. They actually just reduced their, they had a 4-year degree requirement for anything in the DNR, and now that's been reduced to a 2-year degree in the last week. So they're having troubles filling roles up here and positions up here as well.
We should see if we can get 5 Mile Rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have looked at, some federal parcels. There was one in Hoveland, and it's like in the commercial zoning district. There's not much commercial zoning district right there by the Chicago Bay Market. And if you look at that, the whole commercial district is state-owned for the most part. I mean, you wouldn't expect to see much development there unless there was a change of ownership.
Right.
So things like that, looking at Lutz and Tofty Schroeder, again, there you're gonna have to get the townships on board with those initiatives. I know there's a rather large parcel up off the Caribou Trail. It's significantly valuable. And in having some conversations with locals down there in the West End, the last thing they wanted to see is it turned into an apartment complex. But, there's priorities and there's desires and there's initiatives, but.
Well, the good news is we have a lot of parcels that we can really take time to research and we can take action. And I just think developing a policy like this is the first step. So I thank you for taking that initiative and digging in.
And I will keep working the policy. I also, I'm trying to set a time frame where I can bring 5-10 parcels to you guys and say, if you guys are in agreement, I've had Mr. Hale look at this. We've given it the 100-yard overview, and we think that these parcels should just be put on auction. And I'm thinking that maybe we'll shoot for bringing that to the board sometime in April, maybe the second meeting in April, I don't know. But a month from now, I could probably have some of those reports put together and have enough time for Jason and other entities to just kind of glance at it and say, yeah, this will never be a housing project. And then bring it to the board for the board to ultimately say, yes, let's move on putting these up for auction. And then we'll have to get Brady involved because he's generally the one who's moderated those auctions. But I'll just say, whatever I can pull out of the list, and it looks like it's very clearly one that is going to go down that path of auction, I'll plan on bringing that to the board in the end of April for approval. And I hope to have a list of, maybe 5 or 10.
Well, thank you for doing that work.
And you thanked Bob, but thank you, Commissioner Sullivan, for your work on this. You guys have both put a lot into it, and I really appreciate that. One thing I wanted to ask Bob is, do we have a sense of when the Supreme Court's going to make a decision in the Hennepin case?
So I think that case is starting in mid-April. That's when they're going to be hearing the case. I don't know how the Supreme Court works. Like, I know in the tax court, they have 3 months to make a decision, so we all left the meeting and we don't know what's gonna happen. But I'm not sure how the Supreme Court, maybe they don't recess that trial until they've made a decision. Another thing is, we don't know, is the Supreme Court going to be very vague and say, this was unconstitutional, Minnesota, you gotta fix it? Or are they going to say something like, within a year, the state must sell these parcels and the proceeds exceeding X amount of penalty have to be allocated back to the homeowner? Who knows how descriptive they're going to be in their ruling. It could be very vague or it could be very detailed. But I would imagine that by the end of the summer, we'll know how that's going to go. I do also anticipate that if they do rule in favor of Ms. Tyler, there will likely be an appeal by Hennepin County. And I'm not sure how that works with the Supreme Court, but I would anticipate that if that's the case. On either side, a ruling on either side will probably result in an appeal.
And I would encourage commissioners, go to other counties and look at, large counties, like Hennepin and Ramsey, to look at their process and procedures, to be thinking about how the policy we write might impact us.
Supreme Court decisions cannot be appealed.
No?
Not federal,
No.
state can.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, that would really be.
So, and that's why I'm asking the question, because, I mean, if we have any parcels where we think there's even a possibility that the sale value might exceed the debt on it, we just need to be really careful about that.
Right. There are other counties that are talking about, withdrawing all of their sales this year because they don't know how this is gonna go.
Right.
We don't know what the clawback would be. One of the St. Louis County assistant attorneys speculated that this would come under a wrongful takings claim, which is a 6-year statute of limitations. So now, what makes that interesting is we may have a parcel that forfeited 70 years ago, but the excessive taking would occur at the sale, not at the time of forfeiture. So that could be very interesting where, essentially every parcel of ours is subject to a 6-year statute of limitations for an excessive taking claim. And you might have heirs of descendants, just this mess to sort through of who's entitled to what.
It gives new meaning to can of worms.
Yeah.
So maybe this should be on hold until we.
Well, yeah, I mean, the actual sale, but either way, I mean, what's interesting is I don't think that there's a county out there that's gonna say, well, since we don't get to keep the money, we're just gonna let it sit there. It's not in the interest of the county, it's in the interest of the county to get it back in the tax rolls. And if you think about like a piece of land out in the woods, might be looked at a little differently than, say, if a condo or an apartment got seized. You're not gonna just let it sit there. You're gonna sell it, and whatever the proceeds are, the state and the Supreme Court are gonna dictate how it's allocated.
Do you know how many parcels in the last 6 years have gone into our tax forfeited list?
I don't think we forfeited on, well, there's one I can think of, but I think that forfeited in like 2017. So it's gonna be right on that cusp of, depending on the month that it was forfeited. Brady would have a better idea of the number of forfeitures because he's the one who files those documents with the recorder, posts the public notice. But, we had one that went forfeited, I think, in 2017, and they actually, as recently as just last year, were asking to repurchase that property because it wasn't a homestead. Their only option is to purchase it for the appraised value. So if it was a homestead, they could purchase it all the way up to the date of the auction by just paying off that debt. So there's a lot going on with the Supreme Court, and I don't want to pause creating the policy because I think the policy is still going to be very useful in saying, maybe we have a gravel pit for the highway department, maybe there's other uses, but this will get them from going kind of just stagnant and underutilized to, if the worst case scenario is that we sell something and put it back in the tax rolls, that's helping the tax base. If the county doesn't get to keep any of the proceeds, at least they're back in the tax rolls. That's the one advantage and the kind of the obligation I think we have as a county to utilize these parcels and put them to use. So we'll watch and keep an eye on that Supreme Court case and do our best to kind of express the position of the counties and the local governments and how that case could affect us. We've kind of talked about it in our associations, and the speculation is that they're probably going to look at homesteads a little different than, say, vacant land. If you've forfeited on vacant land, they're probably going to be less sympathetic than if you were forfeited on where you were resting your head. That's probably where this is going to, the direction that it's ultimately going to end up at, is just offer more off-ramps to those homesteaders. I mean, obviously, you can't let somebody stay in their house and not pay taxes for 15 years. That just can't happen. But
Other questions or comments for Bob?
certainly, anybody who has input on the development of that policy or things they want to see included, just shoot me an email, stop into the office, let me know, and I'll keep forming this policy as best I can, making sure that we're taking into consideration everything. And ultimately, the end goal is that we utilize those parcels the best way we can.
Thank you.
You're not, your listing of initiatives aren't,
It's not full, no.
okay.
This is a start.
Yeah, like I said, I've had so little time. In fact, even on Friday when I got the email from James that this was coming up, it was like, I've got to try allocate some time to doing that, but at the same time, we're this close to the finish line with our assessment. I know the problem we're having with the assessment right now is that the number, so we get this time adjustment. We have it on the on-water properties. For the off-water properties, it went away. The on-water properties have a 15% time adjustment, and when it's entered into our CAMA system, on a $800,000 sale, our adjusted sale price is $3,000 different than the DOR's adjusted sale price, and it's just a matter of the order that you're making these adjustments. So somebody buys a house, if it included personal property, you reduce the personal property off the sale price. Then you apply the time adjustment, and then if there's special financing, you apply a financing adjustment. And they all have to be done in the exact order to get the same result as what revenue has. But what we've always done is we just take all of our updated values, we load it into the Department of Revenue's spreadsheet, and then we run our ratios and compare it on that, because then you're gonna get the exact same number that they are. But with the, you know, it's just very small amount, like a fraction of a percent that's off, and it's actually working into the advantage of our, like, so when we're looking at these, a ratio that looks like it's 96.8% is actually 97%. So it's just very small, but it's going in the right direction. It's not going down, which could cause us to fall outside of the ratios. Some of our ratios I've parked like right at 90%, just over 90%, 90.5%. So we did our best to get the on-water properties close to that 90% and the off-water properties closer to that 100%, because the time adjustment that went away. It's strange. We appealed the time trends that revenue gave us, or we appealed the rural vacant land, which is anything over 34.5 acres, and we appealed the off-water trend of 27%, because it wasn't 27% last year. And because we appealed both of those, both of them were reduced to a zero trend. They weren't just reduced, they weren't brought down to a smaller number, they were completely eliminated. And we did not appeal the on-water, and that's stuck at 15%. So it makes it a little difficult when you're working with those differences to get the assessment perfect, but we're there. Today, I think it could go off today. We're just doing some reviews. Some of the reviews we've caught is that the islands probably need to be reduced a little bit. All the islands up the Gunflint Trail were remeasured, re-put into our table system, and some of those Poplar Lake islands are going up a little more than they should, so we got to go ahead and tweak those. But we always do this in the last week or two of our assessment, as we run that data query and we compare, you know, what was it last year, what is it this year, the percentage it's increasing, and is it right? So, you know, sometimes you're seeing a 70% increase. Chateau Laveau, those went from $60,000 units to $250,000 units in about 4 years, and they're seeing a huge increase, but it's 100% justified and backed in the data. Now, when you look at like Poplar Island, 11 acres out on Poplar Lake, it does not need a 300% increase. So that's where we do this sheet, we do this spreadsheet and just double check that we didn't miss something.
My favorite part is hearing the appeals of people who own islands.
Yeah. And there's
This reminds me though of a federal senator, I heard quoted on the historical federal senator, I heard on the radio saying, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty much you're talking, and pretty soon you're talking real money.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all
Thanks,
the
Bob.
hard work you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, and like I said, just
Yeah.
so let me know if you have anything to input or any contribution you want to make to this policy. Otherwise, I'll meet back up with you guys and eventually bring to you a resolution.
All right, great. Thank you. And with that, we are
Yeah.
I'd like to come and talk to you sometime. You're too busy this time of year, but about federal hilt.
Yeah.